Let's talk about Israel preparing to attack Iran, and it's vowing to do everything necessary. America, on the other hand, has said that Israel's retaliation will be calculated and limited. Let's take a look.
Thanks for the advice and support, but Israel will make its own decisions. That was the message from Benjamin Netanyahu to his British and German visitors who came here to Jerusalem today. Now, they are now at a G7 meeting of foreign ministers in Italy, pushing for coordinated sanctions against Iran. But their calls for restraint do not appear to have stretched to Gaza, where the killing goes on unabated, or to the West Bank, where tensions have also been escalating. Here's our foreign affairs correspondent, Secunda Kamani.
Hezbollah rockets and drones slam into northern Israel, injuring 18 people. Retaliation for Israeli strikes yesterday that killed 2 of the group's commanders. There's now a global effort to prevent a similar, far more dangerous cycle of tit-for-tat attacks breaking out, with Hezbollah's key ally, Iran. It fired a massive barrage of missiles at Israel over the weekend, retaliation for an earlier Israeli strike in Damascus.
If
the Zionist regime makes the slightest move to violate our territory and harm the national interests of the Islamic Republic, they must understand that they will face a severe and heavy response.
I answered them as best as I could.
Trying to convince Israel's Prime Minister to act with restraint, Britain's Foreign Secretary, as well as Germany's top diplomat, visiting Jerusalem today.
The situation is very concerning. It's right to show solidarity.
Yes, except Lord Cameron talked to Herzog, the president, and found out very quickly that from one pig to the next, that he said it's clear that Israel will respond to the Iranian attack. Yes, very nice.
With Israel, it's right to have made our views clear about what should happen next, but it's clear the Israelis are making a decision to act. We hope they do so in a way that does as little to escalate this as possible.
Sorry, I apologize. My mistake. Earlier I said pig. I should have said Lord Pig. That's right. He's a pig, but a lord at the same time. The proper nomenclature is important to be used in this circumstance. Lord Pig, David Cameron.
And in a way that, as I said yesterday, is smart as well as tough.
The international focus is on tensions with Iran, even as Israeli strikes on Gaza continue. Nowhere else comes close to the terrible death toll here, but this is already a conflict with many different fronts. The occupied West Bank is emerging from days of violent unrest, with Israeli settlers rampaging through Palestinian villages, killing 4 people, torching homes and cars. Israeli settlers have been growing increasingly violent, emboldened by the rise of extremist political allies who are now at the very heart of government. And
I mean, they already were emboldened by that. The thing is, right now, they're also taking advantage of the lack of attention being paid to the West Bank. Also, what's happening here? There's like a little toy car right there on top of the destroyed vehicle. What's that about? Anyway, that is what is happening, by the way. They've been emboldened. They've been getting like actual logistical support from the government because Itamar Ben-Gvir is doing everything he can. He's like arming them, giving them literal IDF gear and shit, you know, fatigues and whatnot. Yeah, we watched the settlers lighting a car on fire, setting a Palestinian car on fire, and then the soldiers just like idly standing by. But yeah, basically the settlers are like, never let a good crisis go to waste, and they're taking advantage of the circumstance by really increasing the pressure and increasing the violence in the West Bank because they're freaks.
By Israel's war in Gaza, Futna and her young family were amongst those who fled in terror.
We were so scared. We started screaming and ran out of the house without taking anything with us. We took our children and escaped. They have been very badly affected. My youngest son hasn't spoken since.
But you'll stay here?
Yes, sure.
Guys, Channel 4 does incredible work on this process. I don't know why you guys like hyper focus on the aesthetics of the language that Channel 4 is using. It's like getting mad at me for saying something. Come on. This is in the Western media. Channel 4 is one of the only consistently good coverage that you will find on Palestinians, and they have been doing that from the jump. It's actually shocking, especially considering that they're British. And like, if you think America is up its own ass with our ultra Zionist attitudes, like England is a whole different ball game. They are nutty mode over there and have been for a very long time. Al Jazeera, I do not consider a part of Western media. I'm saying that out of mainstream outlets in the West, which does not mean your favorite independent journalists or whatever. I'm talking specifically like CNN and BBC, Guardian, Sky News. Channel 4 is one of the few outlets out there, very few, that is consistently good.
My land, my children, our memories, our life is here. Where should I go? This is the place my son was born. Whatever happens, I will stay here.
The rioting began after the disappearance of a 14-year-old Israeli boy. Soldiers later found Benjamin Achimeah's dead body, saying he was killed in an attack by militants. In response, furious settlers targeted more than a dozen Palestinian villages over several days. Part of a wider, accelerating effort, residents say, to try and drive them out.
Here's a great question. Why should they not do this? They're literally just doing Israel shit. They're doing more Israel. Except this time it's not like a legal entity doing it. It's terrorism, but it's still state-sponsored terrorism. It's a literal pogrom that the Israeli state is offering. The Israeli state is offering security to. Because when they do this shit, the IDF is supposed to stop them from doing this, right? Technically, under international law, Israel is an illegal occupier of the West Bank. They shouldn't even be there. But like, even in the most extreme circumstances, like the IDF's goal is to stop the settlers from fucking doing this, but they just sit there and defend the settlers and shoot at the fucking Palestinians. And the state is arming them to do this. So why wouldn't they do this? They're fucking insane. Why wouldn't they do this? Imagine a world where if the American government, for example, was, let's say, routinely trying to prosecute trans people, okay? Routinely trying to prosecute trans people, and then giving weapons directly to like Christian fascist militias to go out and hunt trans people. Yeah, they would go out, bust down doors, and start killing a bunch of people that they assume are trans. That's it. Now, obviously, we haven't gotten to that final part of the, anti-trans pogroms here in the United States of America. But the better analogy would have been against black people in the globe, in the South. That is exactly what happened with the Klan and with all of the fucking lynch mobs. When the federal government stands idly by and basically pushes the needle in one direction or tips the scales in one direction, then yeah, you're getting the go-ahead. They're basically outsourcing the awfulness that they were going to do anyway to independent and very interested outside contractors
from their communities. Some of the violence took place under the watch of Israeli soldiers.
More like if the U.S. militarized Texans to settle in Mexico, the U.S. did militarize Texans to settle in Texas, which was Mexico. We did do that. America as a nation is built on the identical principles of settler colonial violence. This is how we did indigenous genocide. What do you think? This is precisely what we did. We fucking butchered and genocided the indigenous population that lived here. The state offered weapons and also additional protection so that we could do that. Almost 250 years later, here we are.
Here they do nothing to stop an arson attack. The army has said this incident is being investigated.
And then they investigate themselves. And it's like the fact that those guys are there with Molotov cocktails, and even the fact that the IDF is there, is already illegal. Like, you are occupying territory that does not belong to you. Every part of this, like, what are you going to investigate? Oh, wow, we investigated and we found no wrongdoing. It's like, oh man, great. The legal process works, I guess.
Israeli settlements carved into the occupied West Bank are considered illegal internationally and make a two-state solution appear impossible.
It is impossible.
Those
they do
building
make it
believe
impossible.
This land was promised to them by God.
Yeah, and their numbers have grown dramatically over the course of the past couple of decades. Just remember, during the so-called peace process, this is what the Israeli government was actually more interested in doing, and did successfully with our go-ahead in the United States of America.
Today, close to where the unrest took place, settlers returned to plant Israeli flags by the road, flaunting their presence and their power.
And Secunda is with me here in Jerusalem. I mean, so everyone is wondering when this is going to happen. If Britain at least is now saying it believes Israel is going to act, what's the timing?
Well, look, referring to international calls for restraint, Prime Minister Netanyahu said today he'd had all kinds of suggestions.
So let me ask you this. 75 years of this nonsense with very little recognition, from the international community, and like maybe a gentle tap on the fucking wrist every now and then. Why shouldn't the Israelis think that they are, one, God ordained? These freaks certainly do. Not all Israelis feel that way. It doesn't really matter though, because they still do want Israel. But why shouldn't they do this stuff? There is no accountability. There is no mechanism of restraint. Why the fuck wouldn't they think that this is totally valid? We've enabled them. We've enabled them from the fucking jump. Oh shit. Israel considered striking Iran on Monday, but decided to wait, officials say. Okay, we'll talk about that in a second. The point I'm trying to make is this. Israel could not exist with our funding and our consistent aid. Okay. And when I say our, I mean the entire Western world, but especially the United States of America. So how come like we are not at fault here? How come we are not directly responsible? We have enabled them to consistently do. You mean can only exist? Oh, did I say with? I meant without. Israel cannot exist without Western aid. And if we are responsible for Israel existing in the violent ways that it is, and I believe we are, how the fuck have we not restrained them at all up until this point? And even now, we are not restraining them. We're just not. Why should they stop? Why should they stop? We have enabled them every step of the fucking way. Of course they're going to be arrogant. Of course they're going to demonstrate hubris. Of course they're going to be more and more violent.
And advice, but that Israel would make its own decisions. It does seem, as you've said, that some kind of response is inevitable. As to when it might come, one factor could be the Jewish holiday of Passover, which begins at the start of next week. Would Netanyahu want to risk ruining that for Israelis by launching an attack just beforehand, meaning it would be overshadowed by the threat of Iranian retaliation? On the other hand, does waiting until the end of a week-long holiday for a response to what was a very large and unprecedented missile attack by Iran feel too long?
Now, limited and narrow is this phrase that is being used. Now, that's what Iran seems to have told its allies. We understand that's what he's told the British meeting today. The big question is, how will Iran see it?
Well, that is the big question. I mean, you get the impression from the Israelis that just like the Iranians, they do not want to go to a state of all-out war. But at the same time, for a long time, Israel's military policy has been that when you're hit, you hit back so hard that your enemy doesn't ever strike back again. Of course, the reality is things don't always play out like that. And as you've said, what's seen by the Israelis as a fairly targeted, narrow strike that presumably wouldn't cause civilian casualties, wouldn't target Iranian nuclear facilities, might not necessarily be seen as so targeted or reasonable by the Iranians. I mean, underlining how much of a risk of miscalculation there is. Remember the miscalculation Israel made in thinking about Hamas prior to October the 7th. They thought that Hamas in Gaza was not interested in entering it.
Why would they do it when Israeli citizens don't want it? I don't think Israeli citizens, I don't know the temperature. Maybe one of the Israeli chatters can send me a fucking link in here, or those of you who read Hebrew in general. Maybe you can send a poll, but I haven't seen any polls, but about like retaliation to Iran. I'm sure there's a poll. The poll I've seen was roughly 50-50. Okay, that's good enough for me. That is the most amount of restraint you're going to see from the Israeli population. If it's 50-50, that means it is actually, there is enough distaste. Because if you look at, especially when you look at the demographic breakdown between, and this is once again Israel's own demographic breakdown, not mine, the Jewish population of Israel versus the Arab population of Israel, Palestinian citizens of Israel versus the full-blown citizens of Israel, and their interest in pummeling Gaza, the numbers are not around 50-50. Times of Israel poll, 74% of Israelis oppose counterstrike on Iran if it harms security alliances. Over half of Hebrew University survey respondents see the need to consider political military demands from allies, say U.S. aid in thwarting attack obligates Israel to coordinate further actions. Yeah. If it compromises security, I mean, it does compromise security. So, you know, that is much more reasonable. Israel has vowed to retaliate after Iran overnight Saturday fired over 300 missiles and drones at the country. Almost all were intercepted before they reached the country, as the United States led a coordinated air defense shield that involved Israeli, American, British, French, and Jordanian forces, reportedly along with radar and intelligence input from some Gulf states, including Saudi Arabia. Survey conducted at Hebrew University shows that the public is divided on the question of whether Israel should respond to the Iranian attack that took place on Saturday night. 74% oppose a counterattack if it undermines security alliance with Israel's allies. 52% answered that it is better not to respond in order to end the current round of conflict, while 48% answered that Israel should respond, even if that means the price would be the extension of the current round. Yeah, this is definitely very different than at least all of the polls that we've seen thus far from the Israeli population that talk about continuing the attacks on Gaza. It's not just the broader public, though. Netanyahu's base absolutely wants retaliation. Yeah, the Bibists are fucking insane, but hasn't their political power waned over the course of the past couple of years, and especially post-October 8, post-October 7? So yeah, Bibists are like the fucking Trump MAGA hogs, like the most aggro. Well, they're not the most aggro. I'm sure there's the Itamar Ben-Gvir, Bezalel Smotrich, and all of the other fucking settlers who are hyper-focused on, you know, pogroms in the West Bank and shit like that. But Bibists are the still a very, very far-right constituency. They're belligerent. They're insane. Hogs are universal. Yep, they really are. That's why I always say it. But for Bibi's survival in the future, the Bibists absolutely have some higher priority to keep. Yeah. Do you think they will just do de-escalatory strikes on Iranian proxies to satisfy the base? I don't know if that'll satiate the base's appetite for violence and destruction. But yeah, it is funny that we're talking about Benjamin Netanyahu's fans as not being the furthest of the right. That should basically show you how fucking unimaginably right-wing Israeli politics are, especially as it pertains to just doing fascism. That chatter means de-escalatory strikes. When he's talking about de-escalatory strikes, he means like not striking Iranian soil, because striking Iranian soil directly will absolutely meet the standards that the Iranian government has placed upon Israel in their retaliation. This would go beyond a tit for tat, and that would actually be an open declaration of war. Iran would absolutely fucking retaliate way harder with no 72-hour response, most likely. And I mean, this goes further to prove the point that I make all the time, by the way, which is that Israel only responds the force, and the Israeli public only responds the force. You can tell, like, the fact that they're so split on this, the fact that they know that escalating the conflict to Iran would actually bring home into Israel proper the conflict in ways that, like, pummeling Gaza never can. It's just like, because these guys aren't saying let's not attack Iran because, oh no, we'll kill a bunch of Iranian civilians. I'm sure some feel that way, but many are not saying this because they fear for the safety of Iranian citizens. They are making a calculated decision. That's why the number is 74% if it undermines the security alliance with Israel's allies, whereas 52% answered that it is better not to respond in order to end the current round of conflict, as in just keep up the genocide, that we're eyes on the prize. It's a little bit different when there is real possible consequences for the population. The calculation changes dramatically because as it stands currently, obviously, the Palestinian resistance forces are too busy trying to survive and withstand an Israeli occupying force invasion into Gaza. So they can't really retaliate. They can't really harm Israeli lives at all. So it's much easier for them to go, yeah, no, keep pummeling them. This is great. The IDF says 14 soldiers were wounded in the Hezbollah drone and missile attack on Arab al-Aramshe earlier today. 6 troops are seriously wounded. 2 are listed in moderate condition. Another 6 are lightly hurt. In all, 18 people were taken to the Galilee Medical Center in Nahariya for treatment. Fighter jets also hit buildings used by Hezbollah and other infrastructure in Nakura and Irine, the army adds. I do think that like Hezbollah is definitely increasing the pressure from the north. But yeah, Israel's allies, led by the U.S., have urged it against attacking Iran. Hebrew University survey was conducted April 14-15 by internet and telephone and sampled 1,466 men and women representing adult Israelis, both Jews and Arabs. And the university said in a statement, the margin of error was 4.2 percentage points. Poll found that 74% of the public opposes a counterstrike if it undermines Israeli security alliance with its allies, while 26 were in favor of an attack even if it damages ties with allies. Over half, 56% of respondents believe Israel should respond positively to political and military demands from its allies in order to ensure a sustainable defense over time. This recognition that you are seeing from the Israeli public comes from the same attitude that I mentioned. Only when the war comes home do the Israelis ever actually think about the potential consequences and think about exercising a little bit of restraint and urge restraint. Bibis aren't the furthest right in that, unlike Ben Gvir and Smotrich's bases, they really do shit like fundraise for people who burn families alive or chant death to Arabs altogether. However, they're very Trumpy in that there's a cult of personality and they cannot be swayed about anything corruption, la la la, all fake, I shit you not. They chant Bibi, King of Israel at rallies. Yeah, I mean, it's like if the American Nazi Party had like a valid constituency and an actual party representation in the American Congress, and you know, you had like people who are even further to the right than Donald Trump, which we do, and had like actual representation for those people, and then you had the Trumpers who were basically fascist as well, but not as directly and outwardly fascist. Hog is a universal language, exactly. What do you mean if American Nazis has representation? No, I said the American Nazi Party had direct representation in Congress. I'm using my words very carefully. Tom Cotton is a fucking Nazi, but he is still a part of the Republican Party. So in America, we get to like hide I guess most extreme aspects of political polarization under the two-party duopoly. Also, 59%, okay, so 56% believe Israel should respond positively to political and military demands from its allies in order to ensure a sustainable defense system over time. Of the remainder, 32% were undecided, 12% disagreed. Also, 59% believe that the U.S. assistance to Israel against the Iranian attack obligates Jerusalem to coordinate further security actions with Washington, while 26% were undecided on the matter and 15% agreed. Iran launched its unprecedented direct assault on Israel in retaliation for the April 1st strike it blamed on the Jewish state that killed 2 Iranian army officers, generals, and several other officers in Damascus. I looked at the Times of Israel, just says on the April 1st airstrike. Okay, what did they strike? They didn't just strike the army generals randomly. Where was the strike being done in? Where did the strike happen?
And also miscalculating what the Iranian response to the...
Oh, come on, big dog. Why you gotta put the fucking wide shot on these boys to just show the... Come on, bro. I mean, that's fucked up. Yo, Short Kings, you can't catch a break out here.
So how and where could Israel look to respond? Well, the boldest and riskiest option would be strikes on Iran itself. Military bases, missile and drone strikes, or even nuclear facilities could be targets in that scenario. A lower risk approach would be to step up attacks on Iranian proxies, such as Hezbollah in Lebanon or the Houthis in Yemen. Alternatively, Israel could attempt further targeted assassinations of Iranian assets, including in Iraq and Syria, like the one in Damascus, which sparked the latest escalation. A major cyber attack is also an option. Yes, I mean, we saw how divided politically Iran is in the recent elections, when turnout was very low. Are you saying that in a war with Israel, that starts to unify the country politically?
Well, to the degree that I see in the streets and I
mean, look at Yemen, bro. Look at Yemen. People see millions of Muslims under permanent occupation, withstanding a genocide. And obviously, Christ, I should never turn on my phone while I'm streaming. I wanted to check Instagram for a brief moment because I got a DM. And immediately the first thing I see is Bella Hadid. Astaghfirullah. The hell is she doing? Let me tell you what she's doing. She's saving Palestine. That's what she's doing. Posting about skincare. That's a ridiculous ad, bro. That's a ridiculous ad. Anyway, as I was saying, absolutely positively haram. I forgot the point I was making. That's ridiculous. I lost my train of thought. Let's just continue with this guy.
The colleagues, even I did not expect, so some of them who are very critical of the government stance in this, this particular action were met with somehow relief and satisfaction from the I would say the majority of the people, the majority of the politicians, even from the reformist camp, the moderates, faces and figures, were somehow supportive of this action. Of course, they are somehow concerned about the future escalation, but at the same time, they think this was the most appropriate course of action.
Yeah, I was mentioning Yemen because people in the Muslim world across the board, we're not talking about the Gulf nation governments, but like people, the actual people, no matter what kind of conflict that they are experiencing in their own countries, no matter what kind of civil war, no matter what kind of hatred they have for their own government, will very quickly cast that aside when they see the Palestinian plight. I don't know if I can ever describe the attitude. I don't know if I can ever describe the attitude that the Muslim world has towards Palestinians in general. It's virtually impossible to explain to someone who is not from that side of the world or does not have some kind of connection to it. You know what I mean? People see themselves in Palestinians. It's not like just on religion. I am not a very religious person, as you guys know. I'm not a religious person at all, and yet I still see the plight of the Palestinians as a cause to show solidarity to, regardless of religion. Like, there are so many people who are not religious at all, who are from the Muslim world, I guess, to use a reductive term, who absolutely recognize this as a truly evil act, like the Israeli treatment of Palestinians as an understandably, they see it as like a gross, inhumane action perpetrated by the West. So for them, it's a galvanizing factor. Any kind of resistance against the Western imperialists, or any kind of resistance against Israel, which is an extension of Western imperialism, is always going to bring people together. This is why I use the Yemen example. Civil war aside, think about it like this. There are people in Yemen who were fighting one another, backed by the genocide heirs, the UAE and Saudi governments, that were actively arming and aiding and abetting in the genocide of the broader population of Yemen against the Ansar Allah regime, which is backed by the Iranian government. And yet all of those factions turned around and supported the Ansar Allah administration when they chose to take action against Israel. Because every single person, no matter what their background is, unless they're directly tapped into like CIA money or some shit, every single Arab, every single Muslim, no matter what kind of what sect they're from, they will always see what Israel is doing as like a heinous act. So the same goes for Iran as well internally. I'm sure there are people who understandably despise their government. Why shouldn't they? Their government is oppressive. It's true, right? It's a religious theocracy. Now, does that mean that like everyone in Iran resists or oppresses or feels the oppression of their government? No, but it doesn't matter. Iran's actions against Israel will be broadly popular internally in Iran, no matter what. It's the default position in the Muslim world because the aggression against other Muslims, especially considering how important the land is because of Al-Aqsa. Atheists from these countries recognize this also, even if they don't care about the religious aspect. Solidarity with the colonized is also an aspect, of course. I think that's the major point here. That's why I was talking about like secular, non-religious, atheist people living in the Muslim world who might despise their own form of governance. They always cast that aside when there's Western intervention.
Hey.
So anti-Semitism is the only common denominator. You think finding Israel's genocide and Israel's apartheid is to be abhorrent is anti-Semitic? Don't you have any shame or decency to tie Judaism to gross acts such as genocide? Don't you feel like that is actually anti-Semitic? It's kind of crazy that you feel so comfortable 6 months in, still desperately trying to tie Israel's actions to Judaism. It's so fucking gross. It is, in my opinion, no different than like Muslims who would say that like, yes, ISIS is actually doing the right thing. They are upholding true Islam. They are the real Muslims. It's crazy. Well, it's all mixed together in this situation. It is not anti-Semitism that is the leading motivator here. And like how Zionist Christians here in the USA represent Palestinian Christians, same thing. Exactly. Justice is a Jewish value. Life itself is the highest value in Judaism. Zionism weaponizes Judaism in order to justify atrocities. Zionism is anti-Semitic. anti-Semitic. Exactly. It's so wild that, I mean, I don't even think that chatter is Jewish, by the way, because like, it's so fucking wild. It's so wild to look at the history of Judaism as both an ethnicity and also as a religion. Like, the history of the Jewish people is one of withstanding pogroms and resisting to genocide. And then to turn around and be like, yeah, I know that like all of these Jewish figures have almost always historically been at the forefront of resistance to genocidal acts. They have been at the front of any matter of injustice globally, whether it be the civil rights movement in America, whether it be apartheid in South Africa. You will always find Jewish people at the forefront of movements such as this one. And you look at all of that, and then you still go, no, actually, it is a fundamental plank of Judaism to just do genocide to the Palestinians. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
At this juncture in history.
But
civil rights movement, nah, lol. You're wrong. Dude, there's a reason why literally fascists are always anti-Semitic. It's because they abhor progressive change. There's a reason why it's the Jewish plot and the Frankfurt School. All of this stuff is about like making the Western world, which is supposed to be like the supreme form of like the civilized world, the beating heart of the civilized world, more degenerate. And they consider that all to be Jewish trickery. It's because the truth of the matter is that yes, Jewish people do actually find themselves often at the forefront of causes of justice, which is hilarious because they still are. There are still many Jewish organizations. They don't get enough play. They don't get enough coverage, but there are still so many Jewish organizations led by wonderful Jewish anti-Zionists here in the United States that are at the forefront of resisting Israel's apartheid regime. How do you look at that and still behave like the entire Jewish population is monolithic in nature and personally really invested in the increasingly violent ways in which the Israeli apartheid exists and maintaining that violent state? Yeah, they called it Judeo-Bolshevism for a reason, like because you're an idiota. No, Palestine doesn't hate Iran, religious wars, etc., Shiites versus Muslims, etc., so they don't have common enemies. No, that's ridiculous. Sectarian infighting is not as severe as the way that Americans present it within the Muslim world. I mean, sure, there's history there, but no. Palestinians are Sunni, Iran is a Shiite country, and yet Iran is the #1 defenders of the Palestinian resistance groups. Iran is the #1 funder and facilitator of Palestinian resistance. How does that work? If you ask the Palestinians, I'm sure they would be less happy about Saudi Arabia than they are about Iranian intervention in the region. Also, Sunnis and Shias live together in many different parts of the Middle East. Anyway.
Surely nobody wants war. I mean, it's disastrous for all sides.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Of course, the situation in Tehran is somehow a lot of people see with somehow concern the developments. At the same time, they are somehow making fun of the Israeli actions, and somehow at the same time they are very much concerned. The market has reacted to the situation. The market is also very volatile, but generally I think I would say a lot of people have been supportive, have shown their support about the latest action that the Iranian army took.
Now to the Middle East, where Israel is facing intense scrutiny over the...
My Judaism only brings me closer to the Palestinian cause. In recent years, I can't sit around the table with my family during Passover surrounded by imagery of my people walking through the desert for 40 years and not think of 1948, of the Palestinian mothers holding their sons' hands, having walked an eternity barefoot through the Negev, of how they, unlike us, however unjustifiably, have not returned to the promised land. Yeah, it's like so much of Jewish culture is also about like remembering the historic wrongs that were committed towards Jews, and there's a direct analog there to the historic wrongs that Israel is committing against Palestinians. Like the David and Goliath imagery is kind of interesting when you think about it, because it's like it is directly analogous to Palestinian resistance against the much more powerful, the ascetic Palestinian resistance against the much more powerful Israeli oppressive force. Most Jews are notorious for agreeing with each other. Yeah, there's also that too, which is,
Humanitarian crisis in Gaza. The Israel Defense Forces say they are opening up new ways for the the aid to get in after allegations that they've been intentionally limiting access to civilians in need. Deborah Patta's in East Jerusalem with more on that part of the story. Deborah, good morning to you.
A very good morning. The United Nations says Israel has shown signs of good intentions regarding aid, but that over 40% of its requests to transport supplies through Israeli checkpoints in Gaza were turned down last week.
Under pressure from the US to flood Gaza with humanitarian aid, Israel insists it is doing everything it can. Just this morning, saying the UN needs to do its job and collect.
Honest question, what does the Holocaust refugees supposed to do? Homeless in countries that despise them, poor and outlawed? What choice do they have? It is rather ironic that you use Holocaust refugees as a reason for why Israel must exist, especially when you don't, I guess, know the horrifying conditions of abject poverty that Holocaust refugees directly experience in Israel. I don't know if you know this, but like a lot of the Holocaust refugees that came to Israel live in fucking squalor. What is it like the current living existing Holocaust refugees obviously dwindled in numbers now have a what is it? Hold on. I will give you the living circumstances. Oh, here it is. 1/3 of Israeli Holocaust survivors live in poverty, advocates say. Several dozen octogenarians bundled against the cold chatted in Russian and Hebrew as they picked through heaps of carrots, onions, grapefruits in Jerusalem courtyard. Nearly all of them Holocaust survivors. They were picking up donations of food and winter blankets before a snowstorm hit the city on the eve of International Holocaust Remembrance Day. Israelis that want to defend Zionism and the Israeli regime hit that like, well, what about the Holocaust refugees line with the same exact severity that right-wing Republicans love talking about. What about our homeless veterans when we end up talking about undocumented migrants in this country? You know what I mean? They didn't ask what not to do. Much easier to conclude. No, I don't think you understand. The Israeli government does not give a fuck about Holocaust refugees, is my point. If they did, 1/3 of them would not be living in fucking poverty. This is reactionary thinking. That's what this is. It's always the same principle in the minds of a reactionary. They always go for like one of the different subgroups that you can point to be like, look, see, well, what were the Holocaust refugees supposed to do? And it's like, it's the same exact principle. In order to, in defense of the Israeli apartheid, you can't point the Holocaust refugees when the Israeli apartheid regime doesn't give a fuck about the Holocaust refugees. It's no different than a right-wing Republican saying, what about homeless veterans, while they fucking spit on veterans, homeless or not, and only bringing up homeless veterans when it's time to talk about undocumented migrants. Anyway, Israel's facing intense security over the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Not enough
supplies to build 700
not enough scrutiny, in my opinion.
Waiting at the Kerem Shalom crossing. But the UN says it's not just about food, but distribution.
But yeah, the easy answer is the genocide that they withstood in the hands of Europeans, many of them Christians, does not give them the moral justification to kill others in the name of the creation of a homeland. As a Jew here, what Israel's doing is fully evil, but to say that the reason Arab world hates what Israel's doing isn't based slightly in anti-Semitism is wild. Well, I never said that, so that should clear it up. I didn't say that there isn't anti-Semitism at all. Anti-Semitism is super prevalent everywhere, whether it be a Christian country that offers unconditional support to Israel like the United States of America or the Arab world. Of course, anti-Semitism is an ancient form of bigotry, one of the oldest there is, and it has existed in perpetuity. But that's not the leading motivator for why the Arab world and the Muslim world as a whole consider the plight of the Palestinians as a unique cruelty. They did the math wrong, but still got the answer right. We have reached a point in history where we are watching the abused become the abuser. The thing is, there is a lot of anti-Semitism. Of course there is. There's a lot of anti-Semitism everywhere. And it ends up increasing when Zionism is seen as a Jewish cause, even though it is not. This does not make the anti-Semitism right, for the record, obviously. But this is part of the reason why I always say Israel, its creation, and its continued existence being predicated upon ethnic cleansing, ethnic displacement, and also the maintenance of an apartheid regime is anti-Semitic. and does not make Jews safe. It does not make Jews in Israel safe. It does not make Jews around the world safe. That's why I make the comparison to Zionism with ISIS. ISIS actions are falsely attributed to Islam across the board. This is Islamophobia. However, Zionism is not seen in the same lens, even though the actions of the Zionist regime are identical to the actions of ISIS. Ironically, the targets are also similar as well. ISIS mostly kills Arabs, Muslims, other Muslims as a whole. This is part of the reason why many Muslims obviously, understandably, abhor ISIS. Israel, much like ISIS, is also predisposed with the ethnic cleansing of different Arab sects. All matter of hatred towards other humans is learned behavior, but sometimes those lessons are valid. People learn to hate Israel when their houses are blown up. People learn to hate Israel when Israel kills their parents. Okay? They don't learn to hate Israel because they learned anti-Semitism at school. They learn to hate Israel because Israel blew up the school. And of course, it's so understandable. Like, look at the image in front of your eyes. Don't you think that if you lived in that fucking house, you would despise those who blew it up? It's the most normal human condition. This is precisely the reason why, in more sober moments, Israeli officials themselves have understandably admitted that they would, of course, be a part of the resistance groups in Palestine if they were born on the other side of the fucking Green Line, on the other side of the fucking Gaza fence.
Which is hindered by the almost total destruction of civilian infrastructure in Gaza. Roads have been blown up, along with health, water and sanitation facilities.
That's why the early argument to the Western world done by Israel was really funny to me always. I mean, it was gross, but it was also kind of funny as well, that people were like, actually, Palestinians hate Hamas way more than they hate Israel. You don't understand. These guys, they're putting their hands up and yelling, and they're saying, God damn Hamas for bringing this death and destruction upon our heads. And it's like, no, dude, they weren't saying that at all. You're fucking insane. They also recognize, even if they literally don't like Hamas, as far as their civil governance goes, they literally understand it's not Hamas that fucking blew up their goddamn apartment complex, it's Israel.
The problem is that it's not just about food. The problem is that malnutrition, famine is a much more complex. It's much bigger than simply, bringing in flour and bake few loaf of bread or pita.
In the north, one bakery was brought to life for the first time in 6 months after receiving fuel and flour. For many, it is a lifeline. It had reached the point, Wissam Dawood said, where we were eating animal feed. But it is not enough. Many waited more than...
So all of these anti-American terrorists were wrong by America, bad take? No one forced them to sign up? Can't we just give them 2 weeks and a bomb? Oh... If there was truly a God, and if there was any kind of karmic justice, you would experience a fraction of the pain that you are currently callously justifying. Yes, every single person in that fucking breadline has been wronged by America. It is American bombs that fall on top of their heads. It is the American political power that protects Israel consistently doing this kind of thing to them. Yes, they have been wronged by America, and yes, they are perfectly valid in hating America. And even then, they consume American culture. They don't hate the American citizens. They love American culture for the most part. Why can't you see they're the real terrorists and we're just trying to live peacefully in America while American bombs are the ones killing their families? Exactly.
6 hours for just one loaf of bread. Humanitarian workers do what they can. The demand to fill bowl after bowl never ending. 1/3 of children under the age of 2 are acutely malnourished, says UNICEF. Prior to October 7, there were none.
Israel's war cabinet meets again today, but its attention is not on Gaza, but the crisis with Iran. A senior American official tells CBS News that Israel has not shared its plans with the U.S., but some in the administration expect a limited strike inside Iran. Vlad.
Deborah Pata in East Jerusalem for us. Thank you, Deborah.
As James Baldwin also said, I love America more than any other country in the world, and exactly for this reason, I insist on the right to criticize her perpetually. It's cowardly not to. I think those who refuse to criticize America and those who refuse to reckon with its wrongs are those who don't really love America. It is our patriotic duty to try and fucking fix the problem that we're causing globally. It's so funny that dumb fucks who believe that they're championing the American cause will routinely routinely talk about the siphoning of our fucking resources that go to help a select few at the tippy top in the military industrial complex that literally have the audacity to act like they are doing so because they truly have the American best interest at heart. It is I, HasanAbi Piker, who fucking hates America because I say, hey, we shouldn't be spending all this money on bombs and we should instead spend it on our infrastructure, on our resources, on our education, on our healthcare. I'm the fucking guy who hates America because I think unconditionally every American citizen has a right to shelter. Every American citizen should not be in fear of medical debt when they lose their jobs because our employment is tied to our healthcare. You know, I'm the one who hates America. I'm the one who says America bad, always, always America bad. And the patriots are the ones who think, no, it's okay that people are fucking dying in this country, dying on the streets, dying because they can't get health care, dying when killing themselves as a consequence of not being able to find a life that is meaningful, to pursue a dignified existence. Those are the real fucking patriots. It's all out of whack. It's all so distorted. Here, let's look at the U.S. State Department being questioned over Israel's attack on the Iranian consulate.
Have you guys decided yet or made a determination about whether what Israel hit in Damascus was a...
It's been 3 weeks since the Israeli attack on the consulate compound in Damascus, violating international law, violating Iranian sovereignty. And yet the American State Department still can't figure out where they hit and what the building they hit looked like and what the purpose of that building was. That's crazy.
Diplomatic facility or not?
We have not.
So how long is this going to take?
I can't answer that question. We're continuing to look into it. I don't have a timetable, but it's something that
you need to...
we need to gather enough information that will allow us to make an actual determination.
You have no one...
We're just working on it, dude. Round the clock, brother. Stop asking these silly questions, you know? Just like they're still working on that I think she was like 5-year-old that was executed, that was begging for an ambulance, and the healthcare workers that tried to get to her that were also killed. Just like we're working on, you know, looking at all the details into the World Central... Yeah, her name was Hind. Just like we're working on the details of what the fuck's going on with the Flower Massacre, just like we're working on the details of what happened, you know, every day since October 7. We're looking at it. We're going to give you guys a report. Also, simultaneously, we are saying that the weapons that we're sending to Israel are totally valid and are not being used to violate humanitarian law. We are actually openly stating that, like, Israel has a right to defend itself over and over again. I guess we're not looking too hard on all the violations of international law, because if you were to look at it genuinely, even for a second and a half, you would recognize that everything that we are doing is making us culpable in the continued ethnic cleansing campaign that Israel is engaging in. Except the problem is everybody with fucking even a little bit of conscience and also with eyes and ears is recognizing exactly what the fuck is going on. A post-investigation has found that Israeli vehicles were present in the area and that Israeli weapons likely caused the visible damage on the killing of 6-year-old Hind Rajab and 8 others in Gaza City on January 29th. Before she was killed, Rajab called the Palestinian Red Crescent to say Israeli tanks were approaching, and the ambulance driven by 2 Red Crescent paramedics who were killed while trying to rescue her bore a 300-millimeter hole and other damage consistent with a tank round. Elad Goren, the head of coordination and liaison administration at Kojat, an arm of the Israeli Defense Ministry that oversees the Palestinian territories, told the Post that the agency coordinated everything, including the ambulance that wanted to go and find Hind. The IDF denied any coordination had taken place and claimed what its forces were not in the area, despite satellite imagery showing what appears to be a Merkava tank 300 meters away at the time. Interesting. Oh, did you condemn Hamas? Yeah, Hamas was in the ambulance. Hamas was in the car, you know? Palestinian paramedics said Israel gave them safe passage to save 6-year-old girl in Gaza. They were all killed. You know how vulnerable Merkavas are in an urban environment, and if you know how Hamas has been taking out these, you'd know that a van like that could create a blockade forcing these tanks to stop making a kill zone. Wait, what? I do know that Merkavas are vulnerable in an urban environment. Tanks in general are very vulnerable in an urban environment. Wait, are you saying that Hamas took them out? Because, so can you tell me where Hamas got the artillery shell consistent with the Merkava tank artillery? Like with the Merkava tank munitions? You think it was a Hamas tank that did did that then? Damn, bro. Hamas, once again, their ingenuity has no bounds, dude. Not only are they making bathtub rockets, bathtub sniper rifles, this part is true, by the way, they are making those. They're also making bathtub Merkavas now. Yeah? Wouldn't you know it? Must have been a fucking Merkava. Hamas made Merkava tank that fucking blew up these civilians. He's saying that the Merkava was afraid of the van for potentially being Hamas, which is bullshit, of course. No, it's no, he's trying to say that Hamas probably fucking shot at the ambulance to tunnel the tank in. I think that's what he was trying to say. Both of these ideas are still stupid as fuck, especially because the situation is pretty fucking obvious. It's pretty clear what happened. You wouldn't have to engage in this level of insane cognitive dissonance if you could just truly reckon with how evil those actions are and then recognize that Israel is engaging in evil actions. That's what normal people normally do. Even if you love Israel, even if you've been told your whole life that Israel is like has to exist to save Jews across the world or whatever the fuck. Timmy esports. You don't know how modern combat works, I guess. Yeah, dude, you definitely do. That's why you find Israel's actions to be just and permissible all the time. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for your armchair general, your Monday morning quarterback in here. He's like, bro, you don't understand. I play Call of Duty, okay? I'm the fucking most knowledgeable on urban warfare. I watched hundreds of fucking videos. Go read a book on Israel tank doctrine, you moron. How many Israel tank doctrine books do I have to read until I think that it's okay to fucking blow up an ambulance? Is there like a number? Is there a faster way to get the cliff notes on it? How many Israeli tank doctrine books do I have to read until I think the rules of engagement are perfectly valid? I don't think you understand. This is not about Israeli tank doctrine, you fucking idiot. There's no justification for these actions if you have a conscience, which you clearly do not. It's so odd. One day you will understand. You are currently in this chat explaining or trying to explain that killing a child, a 6-year-old child who asked for medical assistance, and the medical assistance that was on its way to save the child, killing them was totally valid because you read a book on the Israeli tank doctrine. We should burn those fucking books then, okay? Because if there's a book out there that justifies the killing of a child and other medical workers in direct violation of all matter of humanitarian law, what evidence says Israel did it? We literally just covered the article, the Washington Post article that investigated the matter. I mean, not that even that article was a necessity in my opinion, because holy shit, you are flailing now because your original position wasn't whether Israel did it or not. Your original position was that Israel did do it, but it actually is good that Israel did it. Now you're moving on to, well, maybe if Israel did do it, it's, or maybe Israel didn't do it after all. You went from Israel did do it and it was good to, what if Israel didn't do it? A hole in the van means nothing. Yeah, you're right. Vans kind of just do that. You're right. Vans kind of do that on their own. So if a hole in the van doesn't mean anything, why did you originally come to the argument as though it was actually valid for Israel to put the hole there? And now you're backed into a corner and you're saying, as a matter of fact, it wasn't Israel that did it. I decided. I really don't think they're backtracking. I'm pretty sure they're just trying to get your attention and hold up the stream with a moving target. It doesn't matter because like there are people who legitimately do say unhinged things like this. And I think it's good to do away with these talking points in real time. I think it's helpful. Hamas uses civilians to hold up Israeli armored columns all the time. Yeah, totally, dude. You're right. It looks a lot like that. Yeah, no, that's probably what was happening. You're right. Israel had no choice but to fucking blow up the ambulance. Notice how you literally went from, as a matter of fact, it wasn't Israel, to literally in 30 seconds back to Israel did do it and it's valid. Pick a struggle, big dog. Figure it out. Which one is it? Did Israel do it or did Israel not do it? Why do you keep swapping that Israel didn't do it back to Israel did do it and it was valid? This is how every Hasbara troll works, by the way. They have nothing. They have nothing. It's a hard position to be in, defending genocide, especially when like it's one of those silly little things that unfortunately for those who do want to defend Israel's genocide, a lot of people look at that and go, it's kind of fucked up. Even people who do want to be on Israel's side look at genocide and go, there's just like this pesky human side of me because there isn't enough fucking evidence to say who did it. Yes, there is. And you recognize that evidence to say who did it, which is why you keep going back and forth on both of those arguments. The problem is, one, criticizing Israel as anti-Semitic no longer works as a counter argument. It just doesn't. So you're fucked. You're flailing. So then you move on to the second thing, which is, well, it's actually Hamas. Hamas is under the ambulance. That worked a little bit for the uninitiated. Never really worked in here, obviously, but that worked a little bit for the uninitiated in the first 3 months of the ethnic cleansing campaign. 6 months in, after Israel's killed white people on top of the thousands, the tens of thousands of brown people, once they started killing white humanitarian aid workers, all of a sudden, the situation has changed. The average person does recognize that maybe Hamas wasn't under the World Central Kitchen humanitarian aid cars. We need to compare it to actually indefensible actions to see that you are wrong. Yeah, no, the actual indefensible actions are serving the top of the hour ad break. I know. The Washington Post investigation found that Israeli armored vehicles were present in the area that afternoon. The Post additionally found that the gunfire audible as Hind and her cousin Leon begged for help, and the extensive damage caused to the ambulance were consistent with Israeli weapons. The analysis is based on satellite imagery, contemporaneous dispatcher recordings, photos and videos of the aftermath, interviews with 13 dispatchers, family members and rescue workers, and more than a dozen military satellite munitions and audio experts who reviewed the evidence, as well as the IDF's own statements. But hey, guess what, dude? This guy's like, not enough for me, because there's no amount of evidence that will cause you to develop a heart when it comes to killing a shit ton of Palestinians. Timmy Esports read a lot of books, okay? Fuck the books that these guys read. Fuck the evidence that these guys are looking at. Timmy doesn't think there's enough evidence. After all, Timmy has read the Israeli tank doctrine, which is why he thought it was valid to claim that blowing up these fucking cars was actually valid. Once Timmy couldn't consistently say that it was valid, he switched around and said, actually, maybe Israel didn't do the blowing up of these cars. Now, Timmy's first argument literally was Van Beet's tank, so the tanks couldn't have killed him, like his rock, paper, scissors, yeah. After the story was published, Miller said the death of Hind Rajab is an unspeakable tragedy, something that should have never occurred. Post review also found that the ambulance was discovered along route provided by Kojat, an arm of the Israeli Defense Ministry that generally coordinates safe passage for medical vehicles with the IDF. There are so many questions you should be asking yourself before you side with some random source. The Washington Post is a random source. I know the dude who wrote this article. Like, personally, I know him, Evan Hill. He is incredibly reliable. We don't always agree on everything. Yeah, I soft-locked his dialogue tree that he went to, the Washington Post is unreliable. Yeah, they must also be Hamas. In mid-March, Elad Goran, the head of coordination and liaison of Mission Kojat, told the Post that the agency coordinated everything, including the ambulance that wanted to go and find Hind, but said he was not aware of the specifics. Kojat did not respond to repeated requests to clarify. Of course, Kojat and the Israeli Defense Force would never actually coordinate with humanitarian aid workers, only to then have someone on the ground blow them into fucking bits over the course of like a 2-kilometer corridor set up for humanitarian aid workers with clear deconfliction communication in real time. Oh, wait, that did happen. That happens all the time, but this time it happened a couple of weeks prior to white people. That's why you can't make this argument any longer. It had happened to 200 Palestinian aid workers previously, before the 7 white aid workers that were killed, murdered, slaughtered by Israel. But you know, I'm sure there's a book that fucking shows you exactly how that is also valid. The IDF denied that any coordination had taken place, repeating its assertion that its forces were not in the area. It did not comment on too detailed timelines of the incident or on the expert findings provided by the Post. It was not possible to reach Hamas' military wing for comment on the incident. Humanitarian officials have warned that a system of coordination with Israeli military designed to protect the aid deliveries and life-saving ambulance maneuvers is broken. Israeli strikes on World Central Kitchen. Oh, well, there you go. They're mentioning that as well. That's crazy. Yeah, the deconfliction efforts fail because it doesn't fucking matter if you tell the IDF that you are a sponsored humanitarian aid organization. How about you ask yourself some questions like, how far will I go to defend Israel's senseless ethnic cleansing campaign? You know, how far will I go? Are there any red lines I will draw? I do want to know, chatter, is there something that Israel could do that you would find to be unconscionable, other than like letting Palestinians breathe, of course, because we know what your perspective is on that front. Anyway, random source, the Washington Post. Fucking asshole. Anyway, killing terrorists is always a good thing. Yeah. All right. Well, one man's terror is another man's freedom fighter. A lot of the world views the Israeli Defense Force as terrorists, understandably so, because what they are doing is terror. So what do you think about that? How does that work for you? Because the unconditional support and the public sentiment that you relied on to be able to launch these one-sided arguments no longer exists. So what do you do then? What do you do now? You're also talking about a 6-year-old and fucking ambulance medical staffers. You said a 6-year-old Palestinian is a terrorist, and the fucking medical workers are also terrorists on top of that. I think you're a terrorist. I don't think you should be murdered, though. That's the difference between you and I guess. Because only a fucking terrorist, only a brainwashed terrorist could sit there and say a 6-year-old is, you know, a terrorist. Support any military who goes to war against the terrorists? Okay, well, thank you for your unconditional support to the IRGC. Inshallah, brothers. Okay, the Zionist entity will be brought to heel, is what he's saying, I think. Moving on from Timmy 2-time. That's another conversion. We'll take those, boys. My man said the Zionist entity, the terrorist regime, will be brought to heel by force, and any military action against it is valid. That's what he's saying. Yeah, another one flipped, dude. Let's go. Timmy Terror. You didn't finish the video you were watching? Oh yeah,
on the ground in Syria.
We have arranged,
overtly,
as I said to you when the last time you engaged with me on this question, we have a range of abilities, a range of ways to gather information. They're partner countries of ours who are on the ground. We have intelligence capabilities, obviously, and we're continuing to gather information, but we've not yet been able to make a determination.
I get it, but you were pretty quick into condemning the the invasion of the Mexican embassy in Ecuador.
That was a very clear, well-established embassy.
And this is not very clear where they blew up.
This is something that is taking.
Yeah. It's just not clear if it was considered a consulate compound or not.
A little bit more time.
No one died in that incident.
I'm gonna do the DJ Academics interview right now after this
is
over.
The question was, was it an embassy or a consulate or not? And it was very clear.
How hard
it was very
is it
clear
to figure that out?
in the case of the Mexican. It's something that we're gathering information on.
Like 2 weeks.
And
yeah, it's been 3 now. All right, let's God, it's just getting harder and harder, man. Getting harder and harder to fucking defend Israel publicly. Just so much harder. Yeah, I have that article literally right here. That Israel considered striking Iran on Monday, but decided to wait, officials say. Oopsie. All right, where's the DJ Academics interview? Chat, do we have it? Let's take a look at this beautiful piece of content that was given to us by the content gods.